Welcome to the AWE podcast, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Marcella Mandeville, your host and the CEO of Alberta Women Entrepreneurs. It's truly fantastic to connect with our community through new and exciting channels. Every episode of this podcast is designed to inspire, educate, and empower our listeners by showcasing the remarkable journeys of women entrepreneurs. So whether you're just starting your business or looking to scale up, we're here to support and guide you on your entrepreneurial path. Thank you for joining us today. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to acknowledge that this podcast is being recorded in Edmonton, Alberta, on the traditional lands of the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. We recognize the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous people in this region and across Canada. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and the mistakes of the past, and we are committed to moving forward in partnership with our communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So today we're talking about the evolution of supply chain as it relates to a digital landscape. And I'm very pleased to have us joined by Melissa Martin, CEO of Ween Green and facilitator of our Strategic Edge program. Thank you for joining me. To get started, maybe could you tell us a little bit about the Strategic Edge program?
Oh, I would love to. So the Strategic Edge program helps women entrepreneurs identify the roadblocks in business and find efficient, data-driven solutions to avoid or get around the roadblocks. So our program focuses on entrepreneurs that have a few years under their business belts, and they're looking at ways to grow their businesses. So we dive into their data that the company already has and then help business owners discover their current growth opportunities in that strategic lens. As the name suggests, we also build a strategic plan for business growth.
So let's dive into digital transformation. What are the key technologies that you're seeing that are impacting and shaping the modern supply chain?
Sure. So I love this question because it instantly makes me think of when Amazon announced that they were going to start doing their drone deliveries. Do you remember that announcement and how shocking that was? And now we hear things about all the different softwares and technologies that we can use in supply chain, and it's not quite as shocking. So when I think about the specific technologies that are changing the supply chain over the past decade and even closer to within the past few years, I think of the cloud-based integrated systems. So when I started Ween Green 16 years ago, we had a WMS, a warehouse management system, and an ERP, and they couldn't integrate because we used a third-party logistics company. But now with all of the cloud-based software options, everything can integrate and talk to each other, which allows way better automation for our companies. And also because I'm sure we're all thinking of it, as soon as somebody says technology nowadays, we think of AI, and AI is a remarkable tool in the supply chain. So from being able to decipher big data to sourcing the endless uses within our AI technologies, they seem to be appearing every single day, a different option. And then lastly, I think of physical representation of not only AI, but also technology in supply chain is robots, the use of robots. If you go into warehouses now, you'll see robotic sorting machines, inventory tracking machines. A lot of people are using the IoTs, the Internet of Things, to track inventory. So we're seeing it from everywhere, from inventory tracking to drones dropping off our packages.
So with that in mind, I mean, there's a lot of change that's happened and a lot of technology that's being implemented, even what we've seen very rapidly in the last 5 years. In your opinion, what are some of the benefits and challenges from the viewpoint of small businesses, and what works and perhaps what is a little bit down the road for us to be able to make effective in our businesses?
Yeah, I love that. So I think one of the biggest benefits that I'm seeing is the adaptability that a company can have when there is interruptions, especially supply chain. If you think of even the past 4 years in supply chain, there's been so many disruptions. So having that technology that allows us to read the room a little bit faster so that companies can pivot. And the example that I like to use is if you're a company that was making high heels in 2020 and you wanted to stay in business, you probably had to find a way to pivot and maybe looking at all of the big data out there. Your AI, the software that you're using, it would pull in some information for you to use, and you could pivot to maybe making fancy slippers for work at home, right? So we've got that as the benefit is we can react faster if we're paying attention to the different opportunities. And then obviously with everything new, there's lots of challenges. But I think the biggest challenge that I see when I'm doing business advising for everyone else, and even within my own company, is data chaos. There's so much data, and we want to go and we want to use all of the different software, and we hear about something almost daily and think, oh, I need to be using that. How do we implement it? But really, we need to be a little bit more strategic about which options we're going to use. But it's a challenge because we're just learning about AI and big data and trying to figure out what works for our company. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge.
Well, there is, I mean, absolutely an abundance. When we look at sort of abundance versus scarcity, we're certainly looking at abundance in terms of what's out there for resources, what data is available to us, and what we actually need to do with that to be effective and to make the right decisions within a business. And I know with the Strategic Edge program in particular that you're involved in, that's a key component, is around how do we decipher, how do we work through all of these opportunities of data, of technology, of information for us to make the right decisions as leaders. And I think we're always struggling with that. And that challenge will always be predominant, but also hopefully the advantages and benefits of getting access to this technology at more affordable rates with more accessibility will make that change in the landscape, especially for small business, because historically access to this kind of technology and this kind of advancement has been not in the hands of small business. So this is, I feel, a very exciting time for small business to take advantage of this. And I hope this is what you're also seeing in your work in the entrepreneurial community, within the Strategic Edge program and other things that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
So when we look at, we talk a lot about technology, and one of the key components that's always a concern or perceived as a challenge is how do people factor into this? And, what's the human factor? And, there's concern, there's worry about the loss of jobs, about the loss of, really key components of our industrial being as nations tied into how people interact with doing their jobs. So when we look at technology advancement, what's the human factor? Like, what's the role that you see people being, evolving into and people being involved in that makes the most of these technological advancements and also being able to, I guess, best employ and make use of the incredible human talent that's being developed every single day?
I think this is such an important conversation, and I'm glad that you're bringing it to us because there's worry, right? There's worry that people will be replaced by robots, and we have this kind of scary outlook on it. But in reality, when we look at the global supply chain, every piece of the technology is still managed by humans. Right? So we still have that human exposure, and they're interacting, they're updating, they're analyzing, and then they're implementing the different data and the different technologies that they're finding that will work for the companies. And so I've always kind of thought of these technologies as a bit of a cheat for a business. It just gets us ahead. It just allows us to skip a few steps to further our business. And I like to use this example because it's very relevant to my company. We obviously try and implement as many integrated technologies as we can. And within our operations, we have quite a bit of automation. So we have a factory, we follow the traditional supply chain of sourcing and manufacturing and shipping and then distributing to our customers. And it's pretty seamless. We're pretty happy with the way it's set up. But when there's something that goes wrong, we need that human to interact with not only the data, but the other humans to try and resolve the issues. So now when we are implementing this, we're not replacing our people, we're just reassigning their roles. So maybe somebody before that was doing the receiving for my company, and now I've got a robotic receiving operations set up. I still have somebody that's ensuring that that's working properly, that the receiving is coming from the truck to the person, and that all of those human connections are still available.
Fantastic. I mean, do you have any real life examples? I mean, given the fact that you come from a business that has done a lot in the manufacturing space, which, is incredible, and manufacturing and being part of a global supply chain, do you have any examples of this in practice?
So I have about 1 million. So I'll pick one really quick off the top of my head. And I just think back, it was actually 2020, after the pandemic had started. So we were already seeing a very big problem with our supply chain, but we were able to get our glass food containers. And so we had all of our data in place. We had all of our technology. So we knew our lead time. We knew how much we could manufacture at once. And our operations manager at the time thought, let's go a little bit ahead because everything's a bit unknown. So they reached out to our factory, and the relationship with the factory, we actually found out that although we had product, we couldn't get packaging. The cardboard factory in South Korea had burnt down, and cardboard's already hard to get in South Korea. And so we lost that major, they supplied, I think, 90% of South Korea's packaging. Yeah, so we had to then kind of go back and see what we can do and go back to that sourcing, and what we had already had. And AI actually came in and saved the day on that one. And they were able to source a different factory so that we could then package our products and get them over here to sell.
Wow, incredible. So what a way to kind of work through a really significant challenge and look at another opportunity. So when we look ahead, so, there's so much that has changed in such a short amount of time, and it's a bit hard to look ahead because we don't know how the pace of change is even going to exponentially change in the future. But generally, what are some of the emerging trends that you're seeing that would impact the future of supply chains?
Again, love that we're including this because I think it's a really important discussion to talk about. I've mentioned a little bit in today's podcast about traditional supply chains. Traditional supply chains, they're very linear. The data is often not integrated. There's often not a lot of automations. And if there are automations, they don't know what to do when there's a problem. They don't know what to do when the cardboard factory burns down. And so what I'm seeing now is something called a living supply chain. And living is an acronym. So it's for living, intelligent, velocity, interactive, network, and good supply chains. And this living supply chain, picture it, instead of one straight line, it bounces and it circles and it comes back around and it skips a step. And so these new supply chains in our operations allow the data to make the decision really fast, which is exciting. So I just think we're able to keep up a little bit more with these changes. And a great example of this is blockchains. Blockchains, and people are starting to understand what blockchains are, and that is very much a living supply chain.
Well, and blockchains and supply chains have been talked about for a number of years. And so it's really exciting to see the evolution of seeing it come into practice and how it can actually work. And we're starting to see way more success stories out in the media, in supply chain channels for sure, about how this has actually made an impactful difference in moving supply chains in a more modern way. And when we look at supply chains, too often we've looked at global supply chains and supply chains that are external to where we live and where we do business. And now we're looking at more things like onshoring and being able to include more localized participation in supply chains, which is a great opportunity for our businesses locally to get involved. If they've not been involved in global trade or business trade, this is a great place to get started, to be like, how can I be part of a supply chain from right in my backyard into something that could go around the world, which is, I think, an incredible opportunity. So, as we look to start to wrap up in our questions, what is your advice when you think about what advice you would give to businesses looking to embrace digital transformation in relation to their supply chains? And we know that supply chain and access to inventory has been a significant issue for the last number of years. And a lot of people thought it started during COVID. It actually started well before COVID, that we had significant supply chain issues around components. And the smallest pieces, if the smallest piece is missing from your supply chain, it creates an entire disruption in your supply chain. So it can be as small as, a microchip, for example. And so, my last question is, what advice do you have around this opportunity and how businesses can embrace digital transformation to optimize their supply chains and their participation in supply chains?
I think this is really important to kind of zone in on. And I just want to say our company was hit hard. Our supply chain was hit hard. We dealt with this. I understand that, even all the strategy in the world might not be able to predict. But what I would suggest to everybody is to come at this strategically. So not just see something online, and sign up for a new technology or tell your team to implement AI tomorrow, to use the data that you already have had in your company to make some of these decisions. So checking out your current operations, do a customer journey map. What does that look like? What software could you implement to make that better? Looking at your supply chain, I want you to really draw it out. What pieces do you currently have in your supply chain? And then find the software to match. So don't start at the software and technologies. Start at where you know your pieces are going to be, because I think that people might get lost down this rabbit hole of all these technologies. And there's a lot of marketing at us right now at small businesses. And they're like, implement this, implement this. And even I kind of fall down sometimes and I'm like, guys, we need this. And then somebody will be like, Melissa, that doesn't even exist in our supply chain. So just really being strategic and look at what you have, what you need, and then try and match into the software and technologies that are going to help you automate and integrate everything quickly.
I think that makes perfect sense. And I guess my last question is around, before we wrap up today, is around where to go for that advice. Where to go for that insight. I really appreciate that somebody said to you, hey, Melissa, that maybe is not going to work for us because that doesn't actually fit with our supply chain, doesn't exist within our supply chain. Not to say it shouldn't, because maybe that's a business opportunity down the road. But where should one go to think about, where should I go to get that advice, to have that conversation, to really dive into making those decisions? Because it can be a lonely place to make some very big decisions that could be really beneficial, also very expensive, also very challenging. It's a big job to be an entrepreneur, to run a business. So just wondering where you go for advice and thoughts on this, and what you would recommend to others.
It's funny that you're asking where I go for advice for my operations and technology and my digital transformation, because I mentioned earlier about our operations manager, and half the time in our company, the operations manager is actually me. So I am not going to somebody with so much more knowledge than me. And I often also have to find the advice. And as small businesses, I look at a corporation that has 7 people in their operations team. And I'm so jealous of that. I wish that we had access to that. And what we do have access to is networks like AWE and the Strategic Edge program. So when we bring participants into the Strategic Edge program, we try and make sure that everybody's kind of on that same wavelength in their business. They're looking for the same growth, because oftentimes that peer-to-peer is going to not only help us bring different people together to be able to share what they're currently doing, but then also have the AWE team advising us and helping with different advisors and different experts. So we have a team. It's just not anybody that's sitting at a desk in our office. We just have them kind of spread throughout the province, which has been amazing.
Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Your guidance, your expertise, your experience is so valuable, and we're very grateful to have entrepreneurs, business owners like you in our network as part of our AWE family and our community, to be able to share this insight and this knowledge with everyone out there. So just a big thank you for your time and your knowledge, and looking forward to the next time we get to connect.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much for having me. Have a great afternoon. I don't know what to say. I love you.
Oh, I love you too.
Don't edit that out.
we need to keep that in. Entrepreneurs, AWE is here to provide you with the tools to help your business grow through our Strategic Edge program. Visit the AWE website at awebusiness.com to learn more about our program and how we can help you work on your company rather than in it. Thanks for joining us today.